It's March 8th here in our Southwest Ohio Zone 6B garden, and today is the day that the garden is officially opening for the 2025 season. We'll be planting our onions today. We started these onions from seed on January 13th. They were potted up into their final cells early February. I think it was February 3rd, so they've spent the last month or so growing here. For about a week, we've had them outside getting acclimated to the weather. And today we're going to plant them in the ground. Before I do that, I just wanted to talk about how we decide on which day to plant our onions. When deciding when to plant the onions out, we want to get them in the ground as soon as possible, but we also don't want to subject them to shocking cold weather since they've been used to being grown indoors. So what we're looking for somewhere around the beginning of March is a string of relatively mild temperatures with the lows about freezing or above. Now, well-acclimated onions can withstand lower temperatures into the mid-20s, but really for our transplants, we just want them to be able to get used to their outdoor surroundings before they get shocked by the cold. If they get too cold right after you transplant them, it can make them more prone to bolting. Luckily, this week, beautiful weather, and we're gonna get our onions in the ground. As far as spacing the onions, I've put these 10-foot EMT conduits to show where I'm gonna have my rows. These are somewhere around 6 to 7 inches apart. And then within the row, we're gonna do 4-inch spacing. We actually dropped our spacing from 6 inches within the row to 4 inches last year. And we still got really big onions, and obviously we had more onions in a given bed. So we're gonna go back to that relatively tight spacing. The exception to the 4-inch spacing are these Ailsa Craig onions. We potted these up in 3-inch pots, so they're bigger than the ones that are in the 72 cells. And we're gonna space them about 8 inches apart. Our goal is to have just a really big onion with these, more of a novelty than practicality. As far as how deep to plant the onions, we have these planted up into these cells. So we're just gonna plant them basically right at soil level. But sometimes you'll have onions that are bare root. And so what you wanna look at is there's this bulge that will eventually become the onion bulb. That should be out of the ground, and then everything else should be underneath. Usually that means planting them somewhere around 1 inch to 1.5 inches deep. So let's go ahead and plant our first onion. I'm just gonna create a small hole, see relatively loose and fluffy soil. And I'm just gonna firm that down right around there. We'll water it in once we have all of the plants planted. I've got more than 200 onions to plant here, so I'm gonna do a time lapse while I do that, and we'll get back to you once they're all planted. For the Ailsa Craig onions, we potted them up in these 3-inch cells, so you can see they're actually pretty big here. We're gonna space them a little farther apart in a separate bed to see how big of an onion we can grow. Well, that took a little while, over 200 onions planted. I'm gonna be using this AgroThrive water-soluble organic fertilizer, just relatively dilute. I'm gonna give them a drink of that to water them in. Probably won't need to fertilize them for a good month after that. And then that first time when it starts getting warmer, I'll side dress with blood meal in the future. The other thing I'm gonna do is put this fleece row cover over the newly planted onions. I found a little protection from extreme cold, as well as the wind does a great job just getting them established this first week. High five. Now that I've got the Ailsa Craig onions planted in this bed, I'm also gonna direct sow carrots here. We generally prefer fall carrots rather than spring carrots, but we're trying a new variety, so let me show you what we're gonna grow and how we're gonna do it. So I'm gonna plant carrots right here in this row. Just a few things about carrots. You do want to direct seed them. You don't want to transplant them or you'll get kind of stubby little carrots. The other thing is that the seeds are really small, and I do have a little tip for that. And then the last thing is you don't plant them very deep, but they have to stay moist the entire time. So there's a few tips and tricks for that. Let me show you all of those. As far as the seeds being small and hard to handle, one thing I really like with carrots is to choose a pelleted seed. A pelleted seed is basically a seed that's encased in sort of a clay-like material. Let me show you kind of what those look like. So normally a carrot seed would be quite small, but you can see they look like sort of a large white seed there. The seed's actually inside that. That really allows you to seed the carrots with better spacing, and you have to do a lot less thinning this way. As far as keeping the carrot seeds moist during the entire germination phase, there's a few different tips there, but the thing I like to do is just use a board. This is a relatively common technique. So I'm gonna plant the seeds, and then I'm gonna place this board over the top after I water them in. Really just keep the top of the soil from drying out and allow the seeds to germinate. I'll check the underneath the board starting about a week from now every few days to just see if the carrots have germinated. Then I'll remove the board once they do. The last tip for carrots just has to do with the soil. First thing is you want to remove anything that's sort of larger woody pieces. The carrots, they really want to be unhindered as they send their taproot down. That's what's going to be the thing you eat. So you need sort of light, fluffy soil. You want to get rid of anything that will sort of deflect the carrot. That's why you'll get those sort of strange misshapen carrots. The other thing that you'll want is to make sure that the soil is very soft. So if you look here, I can just put my hand right into that. That's exactly what you want as far as allowing that taproot to come down and having a nice long carrot. So I'm going to go ahead and get these seeded. I'm going to then water them in with just water, no fertilizer, and then I'll place that board over the top. All right, last thing on the list outside is to just turn this bed over and get it ready for planting. This bed had our beets, we had some snapdragons, we also had carrots in here, and surprisingly, a lot of the carrots overwintered, so I actually think we're gonna get an okay carrot harvest when I turn this bed over. When I made these beds, I created a mix of peat moss, compost, and vermiculite. And like any raised bed, each year we've had a little bit of settling. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mix a small batch of that. I'll show you how I do that, and I'll sort of top this bed off. I definitely didn't think I would be getting a whole bucket full of carrots. They're actually still good, even though it was about 0 degrees outside. I'm gonna wash this one and give it a try. All right, this carrot was sowed last summer and somehow overwintered. You wanna try some too, Shanko? Let's try it. Oh my gosh, it's great. You wanna try one? All right, now that I've got all the old carrots and beets out of there, I just need to top this bed off. So let me show you how I make some additional mix to put into the raised bed. I use a modified Mel's mix that was popularized by Mel Bartholomew from the very popular gardening book, Square Foot Gardening. Basically, I'm gonna be mixing peat moss, then I'm gonna be adding compost, in this case black cow, but when I actually filled the beds I used compost from a whole variety of sources, and then I'm going to add vermiculite to it as well. All right, let's go add it to the bed. It's a good tip of why to have wide enough pathways to get wheelbarrows in and out. You can see my pathways are about 4 feet wide there. I'm just gonna rake an even layer of this over the top. And because it's somewhat dry, I have found incorporating it with the existing soil to be helpful. Usually I don't like to, till up the soil in the beds very much, but having a sort of dry top layer can be a little bit hydrophobic, and so mixing it in will allow the rain to sort of penetrate in a little bit better. Last thing to do, just get the drip irrigation back and staple it in place. I'm not going to mulch this bed right away, and that's because we've got some nice warm weather. I want the soil to warm up a bit. We also have some rain coming on the weekend. So I'm gonna let that rain hit, and then I'm going to mulch it either with composted straw or chopped and shredded leaves. Wow, what a beautiful day it's been in the garden, getting those onions done, getting the beds turned over. I have a few things to do inside. Let me show you how the brassicas are doing that we started a few weeks ago. And we're also gonna be starting our peppers, so let's head down to the seed starting room. All right, now we're down in the seed starting room and just a few things to do. We're gonna start peppers today. So I got these out of my early March box. I like to keep them organized by start date. And some of the peppers that we're going to grow, Mellow Star is a Shishito pepper, Carranza, and then just the classic Poblano. Those are both ancho type, mild heat. Orange Blaze is a sweet pepper. San Joaquin is a jalapeno type pepper, and Durango is a drying pepper. So the way I'm going to start those, very similar to how I've started all my seeds. I'm basically going to take my seeds, put them into these little to-go containers. I'll water them in, and then I will put the humidity dome back on. Difference here between the other seeds that we've started is these are going to go on a heat mat. This heat mat has a little sensor that I keep at 85 degrees. So we'll put that here, and then I'll get the other pepper started. Quick update on the other seeds that we have. So we've got, these are kind of Asian greens, tatsoi, and then pak choi. We've got our cute little micro dwarf tomatoes. We've been eating those. They're pretty good. What do you think, Hill?
They are comparable to a supermarket tomato, not as good as
not quite as good as summer tomatoes, but it's fun to have in the winter. Yes. We've got all of our broccoli, parsley, cilantro, cauliflower, and then I'm doing an experiment on peas. I actually have some peas direct sown in the garden, and then I'm going to start some and transplant them, and I'm going to just see how the yields are different. There is one thing worth mentioning just because the weather is so good. I mean, it's really brassica weather, even though it's early March. It's still too early to plant these out. My expectation is we're still going to get another rebound where the temperatures get into the 20s, and that's just a little bit too cold for these. So we're still targeting somewhere around April 1st. So don't get trigger happy with the, planting these out. If you've got these in your seed starting area, you probably want to hold on to them and at least just see how the weather shapes up towards the middle to second half of March. As far as what's coming up seed starting wise, we've got eggplant coming soon. This has a lot of our basil, those sort of warm weather plants. We don't start our tomatoes until early April. So don't get too quick on tomatoes. They grow really fast inside. We found early April is good for us in Southwest Ohio with the target plant date about first or second week of May. That's about it for the day. It was a great day in the garden. Thanks for coming along with me, and happy gardening, everyone.